All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much again for joining us for this latest episode of our podcast. Kasama natin, of course, isa sa mga regulars natin on our different shows and platforms. Ito, bestseller. Ito, doon siya show natin sa One News View from Manila. Thank you very much again, Dr. Attorney Professor J. Batongbacal.
Hi, Richard, and to all your, what do you call them now?
Viewers.
Televiewers.
Oh, yes.
Your
You can say
viewers, yes, okay.
kametas and all. Yeah. So,
Okay, good evening as well.
Sorry, Jay, if I came a little bit German and put all your titles there, but I'm going to call you Jay from now. Let's go a little bit Kano style, no? So let's be a little bit formal. Ang daming pag-usapan, obviously. First, Dr. Batongbacal, of course, your expertise are international law, international maritime law, by the way, to be specific. West Philippine Sea, pag-usapan natin yan. Itong mga, ano ba, sabog diplomacy ba ginagawa ng China? Ano itong mga secret deals? Ano itong mga new model? I mean, it's just from one blunder, diplomatic blunder to the other. Is it time to change the ambassador of China? I mean, magmakawa pa tayo sa Beijing, send us someone more competent. But before going there, let me call you Attorney Batongbacal for a while. I mean, you're of course also a lawyer, but not an expert on international humanitarian criminal law. We have Ruben Carranza, maybe other people to talk to about this. But Jay, can we slightly talk about this whole ICC issue? Just your 2 cents, not as an expert, but as an observer. Because in context here, obviously, Jay, is if you want international law to be on our side, if you want rules-based international order, right, you have to demonstrate that at home, in your own backyard. And kung ang style ng Marcos administration is, ayaw namin ng ICC, human rights issues, pero pagdating sa own clause, gusto natin ng suporta, I just feel that's not very, that's not very compelling. Can I just get your general views? Dahil earlier today, we had the DOJ admitting that they're preparing a briefer to look at scenarios of ICC warrants of arrest. We had also former Senator Trillanes multiple times on our shows who has been talking about this moment for quite some time. So the moment of truth is approaching or somehow. What is your view on that? Please go ahead. Again, not as an expert, but just as an observer here.
Yeah, well, generally, you're right naman, ano? I mean, we claim to be a country that's advocating the rule of law, no? And particularly we value very highly international law, no? In general. And necessarily that means that all aspects of international law should be given due respect, no? And the Philippines has always advocated the progressive development of international law because we've always seen it as the refuge and source of strength of smaller states vis-a-vis larger and more powerful states. That's why we became a founding member of the United Nations, no? And we've always held the rule of law and the advocacy for international law very highly, no? In our foreign policy since the 1940s, since independence, essentially. We ourselves, as an independent country, are a beneficiary of that, no? Because it is what made possible, no, our region and the independence, not only for ourselves but also the rest of our neighbors, no, due to this mandate of the United Nations for decolonization. And yun nga, kasama na doon yung establishment of the rule of law, no, and the progressive development of international law. So tama ka, we cannot close our eyes to the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute. Okay, after all, we were one of the staunch advocates of it before, no, and we participated very actively in its negotiation. It's just unfortunate that we had a president who basically did not care at all about this, no, and also tarnished our image by withdrawing from it, no. And now he's actually the subject of a major investigation under it, no. So tama lang, no, na even though we're not a party right now because the previous administration withdrew, no, from the statute, still we are subject to certain aspects of it, especially during the time that we were a party. And so if we're going to be true to our advocacy of international law, then we should let events and the rule of law and their processes take their due course, no? It would not look good for the Philippines to be what you call it, two-faced about it. On one hand, advocating international law very strongly on one side, on one aspect, and then refusing to recognize it on another, which when you think about it is even more primordial because it concerns human rights, it concerns the rights of people, no, and their safety, no, and their protection, no, and the redress of grievances committed against them as a people. So dapat lang, no. So it's good that the DOJ in a way is being very ano tawag dito, very fair about it, no. They know the ramifications and the implications, no, of this very difficult issue, and I guess that's why they came up. They as reported, they're coming up with legal briefs to apprise the leadership of what the scenarios are and what are the options
And
basically.
potentially rejoining the International Criminal Court. This is what we're hearing from the news right now. Before I talk about Professor J dealing with Robin Hood Padilla and Dr. J Batongbacal talking about the UNCLOS and China, can we go a little bit, rewind natin ng konti? Kasi Jay, I remember in one of our conversations, which I think did very well, especially among loyalists yata for understandable reason, we discussed how Marcos Sr. Administration played a very important role in bringing smaller archipelagic countries together so that international law is on our side. Can you give us a little bit background on that? Because our current president happens to have the same name and it's a namesake son. I just want to say that, you know, even the Marcoses have a tradition of having the international law on the side of weaker countries.
Yes, and that advocacy is what resulted in a major change in international law. Before UNCLOS, there was no law on the concept of the archipelagic state, no, or archipelagic waters, or the unity of land and water as a nation, no. Without that advocacy, the Philippines would basically be just a scattered collection of islands, and all of our inter-island waters beyond 12 nautical miles, which includes the Sulu Sea and large parts of the waters, say, between Luzon and the Visayas Islands, no, they would be high seas, meaning they would be open to all nations. We would have no exclusive rights or authorities over anything that happens within those inter-island waters, no. So the Philippines took the correct position in advocating the recognition of our sovereignty over these inter-island waters. And it pushed international law in the direction that we now find, in the direction of where we find ourselves now, which is that other nations recognize our sovereignty over these inter-island waters. And in addition, they also recognize that we're not a scattered set of islands, no, separated by high seas, but we're one political and geographic unit. We're an archipelagic state, no? And it is on the basis of that unified entity that we now measure as well all the maritime zones, which accord to us vast resources. So yeah, I mean, that is definitely a contribution of the Philippines to international law in general. And that's on account of the advocacies that the
Marcos
previous
Sr.
governments, yeah,
Yes.
his predecessors, his father, essentially, as well as the administrations before him, because remember, essentially the advocacy for this started 1956, and it was basically continued, no. So it's a running thread throughout our foreign policy from the 50s onwards until the 80s and now and up to now. Yeah.
So you're saying it's in the DNA of our Philippine diplomacy, right? Fighting for international law, because international law is the best equalizer pagdating sa defending Philippines. Again, I think both of us admit that we have our concerns with, you know, the economic legacy, the human right legacy of the Marcos regime, the Marcos Sr. regime. But I think on foreign policy, all of us are in agreement that he indeed had very significant contribution for our national interest, particularly in West Philippine Sea, particularly bringing smaller countries together. And that's why, you know, in a way, I'm not surprised that the son is moving in the right direction, at least on the foreign policy front. Mahabang usapan yung mga domestic politics. We can talk about that in a separate platform. Now, Dr. Batongbacal, going back again to this ICC, just to remind for people, again, not as an expert on ICC or constitutional law expert, but as just a lawyer, as someone who teaches at the UP College of Law, what is your understanding of Duterte withdrawing from the ICC without the concurrence of the Senate? I recently had an interview with some senators on this issue, which people will watch later on. some of them saying na medyo sketchy din yung nangyari because you want if the Senate had a say in treaty accession, then the Senate maybe should have a say on treaty exit. So even the rejoining of the ICC is a bit complicated and shrouded in that legal uncertainty. What is your understanding of the issue?
Yeah, well, for me, the Duterte administration basically took advantage of a gap in the law, essentially, no? Because the Constitution didn't explicitly mention anything about exiting from treaties, no? Or withdrawing from treaties, despite the fact that they were concurred in by the Senate. And well, I guess unfortunately, the court basically also agreed, no? And so that makes the process of returning to it probably even harder, because now we're going to have to we may have to go through another concurrence process for something that should have already been done, no? Or that was already done before. And so there's going to be a new debate, a new round of debates and discussions, no? And if the Senate is either polarized, or if the Senate doesn't see far enough and doesn't see that this transcends the domestic politics of administrations, no? And it's something that is a concern of the nation as a whole, no? And therefore should be beyond the domestic politics and party politics, no? Then we might end up in a situation where we're unable to go back, no? To that particular place.
Dr. Batongbacal, I mean, Prof, I want to push you on this, Jay, actually, no, is because you dealt with the Senate, you dealt with Senators Robin Hood Padilla. We know for a fact that some of the senators, at least two of them themselves, could be on the ICC list and potentially face warrants of arrest. So considering that, not an insignificant number of senators may be more sympathetic to the position of the Duterte camp, some of them have their own neck in this game or skin in this game. I think it's quite fanciful to expect the Senate to be, I don't know, professional or look at the national. But parang nagugulan ako, Jay, dito, no? I mean, in a sense na parang ang dali lang makalabas ang Pilipinas nung panahon ni Digong. Pero ngayon, yung pagbabalik natin, biglang ang daming veto players. Why not, if it were so easy for Duterte to get it out, then it should be up to Marcos himself to decide it. Kasi for sure, kung bababa ito sa Senado, yung mga pro-DDS, yung mga sangkot sa drug war ni Digong, they're gonna fight, till the end of times, di ba? So ang gulo nitong situation na to.
Well, again, no, it's a simple case of us not having had any prior experiences of this kind, no? Walang precedent yung withdrawal, no? Walang precedent yung rejoining, no? So and because of that, no, the law is not clear on that, and therefore it will be debatable. And the fact now that you have actual senators who might be on trial for that, syempre that adds to the complexity.
Di umano'y, Jay, di umano'y na pro-DDS. Let's just be clear.
Di umano. Okay. who might be on trial.
Yeah. You're being too polite again. I mean, okay, just a side note. Just to remind everyone, what was your back and forth with Senator Robin Hood Padilla? I mean, how, kasi yung mga nanonood, naiinis na sila, pero ikaw, relax ka lang Prof. Batongbacal. I mean, is it the professor in you, or is it the bato at bakal in you? I mean, what's going on there?
Well, I had the advantage of a mute button on for the mic.
Mute na lang.
And also, I mean, I knew that, I was on the screen. So, di ang laki-laki probably nung screen doon sa Senate Hall, any little twitch kitang-kita. So, I had to restrain myself. But, you also have to, I mean, that's part of the training. Sometimes you just really have to have the patience to let a lot of bull go.
Poker face na poker face. Like, pag ako yan, napikon siguro ako or sumagot na, sir, baka naman gusto mo mag-research. Research kayo dyan. But I have a lot of respect for your patience, Jay. Ako, pasensyosa ako, pero spicy din ako. Bardagul. Ikaw talagang bait-bait mo talaga kay Senator Robin Hood. So I really... do you have an advice for other experts who will be soon invited siguro sa Senado?
Ano nga yung Ano nga yung mantra ni Poe sa inner peace.
Inner peace, ayan, bear and forbear. Medyo stoic na tayo. Now, balikan natin itong topic na to. Sorry. Jay, this is how I do it, right? I always put some dark humor into conversation because of course these are very technical, these are very high stakes issues. So kung walang humor, baka ma-board yung mga followers natin. But I think they also understand na there's some element of seriousness in the things we're saying. Pero di umano'y, pro DDS or di umano'y, medyo sangkot dito sa ICC na yan, just to be fair about this. Don't worry, Jay, I'm not gonna ask you about the Maricel Soriano PD. No, yung mga leaks na Marites. Don't worry about it. Now, balikan natin etong issue na ito. Do you think, I mean, is it conceivable na the Philippines can get international sympathy on the West Philippine Sea issue if it doesn't come clean on the ICC issue? The reason I'm saying this is because we had Justice Carpio earlier in our podcast, and he was suggesting that actually the next move should be additional arbitration cases to resolve the status of Scarborough Shoal. I had an interview also with Senator Antonio Trillanes, whose position is, well, no one is stopping us from going back to Scarborough Shoal because technically speaking, no one is in complete control of the shoal. There's a kind of a Chinese presence there or encirclement, I don't know what to call it, but hindi naman na-reclaim ng China yan. So the suggestion of Senator Trillanes is baka you want to muscle your way in with help from allies. The suggestion of Justice Carpi is no, you need additional arbitration. Either way, you need the international community on your side, right? So parang ang gulo sa akin, kung sa ICC, medyo wishy-washy ka, then you want moral clarity or you're projecting moral clarity on this. And by the way, I forgot to mention this. Di ba, Jay, we also tried to bring in ICC on the West Philippine Sea issue. Remember the case by former Associate Justice Carpio Morales, right? Another
Yes.
and of course the late Foreign Affairs Secretary Del Rosario, whereby they try to leverage the ICC to go after individual Chinese leaders for violating the basic rights of Filipino fishermen, diba? Can you also remind us of that? Kasi may nexus na yung ICC and West Philippine Sea.
Yeah. I should review that a little bit more. But
I know it was very technical. Again, of course,
yeah.
I know. I don't want to be unfair to you.
I recall they tried to invoke portions of provisions of the Rome Statute, particularly the deprivation of livelihoods of our fishermen, from the who were fishers of the West Philippine Sea, But unfortunately, the ICC did not consider itself to have jurisdiction over those particular acts, even if they were taking place, simply because on technicality, essentially, the acts over which they have jurisdiction need to be committed within the territory, which technically in international law has to refer to either the land or the territory sea. And the acts that they were complaining of were in the EEZ. And so because of that, they did not have the jurisdictional kumbaga hook, the jurisdictional anchor upon which to proceed. Kaya yun, even though the ICC was inclined to pursue cases that involve mga environmental crimes, unfortunately yung jurisdictional requirements were not met. Okay? So yun yung naalala ko doon.
Nevertheless, there is a nexus in terms of the principle of a rules-based order and rule of law, di ba? Kung sabog ka internally and then you want to present yourself as a champion of international rule of law, then medyo problematic yan. Not to mention, I would say that some would say, wait, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. But again, that's a very political comment. But going back to this, Jay, what is your personal take on this? Do we have to go for additional lawfare, legal warfare, to address the status of Scarborough Shoal, which is still up in the air?
Well, I think Scarborough Shoal kasi is now subject to a territorial dispute, and so our options are limited if the other party does not agree to take it before a court. So ang kailangan nating bantayan essentially is that we do not make decisions or take actions or even issue statements that would undermine our position that Scarborough Shoal is part of the Philippine national territory.
And it's a common fishing ground, right? Supposedly.
Well, the fact that it's a common fishing ground does not detract from the fact that it is still Philippine territory, as far as I'm concerned.
I meant in terms of China has no right to prevent us and others getting there. So China is violating international law. That's where
yes. Yes, I think, well, that's where the arbitration comes in, where essentially they rule that it doesn't matter who actually has sovereignty over this, even if that's resolved much later. What is important is that the economic activities, traditional fishing activities, should not be interfered with. No? And that's what China continues to prevent. Okay, so it does continue to violate or does continue to act contrary to the findings of the 2016 arbitration. And China can no longer claim good faith, or they can no longer claim that no, this is our right, because essentially it is still disputed territory. Okay, and also, yun nga, even if it were found to be China's, no, they still could not be allowed to prevent traditional fishing activities of Filipinos from taking place.
Thank you for that. I keep on saying Prof. Batongbacal, not because I want to be foreign, it's because some are coming in late and they're wondering sino kausap ko, di ba? So don't worry, maging household name ang boses mo soon. Hindi lang itsura mo, Jay. Professor Batongbacal, going back to this, let's talk about. Okay, ito na. We're transitioning na to the. I mean, we didn't mention the word Duterte. Obviously, the whole ICC has one thing or the other to do with Duterte. So one nexus between ICC and West Philippine Sea is obviously international law, rule of law. The other one is the Duterte element. But again, none of us is ICC expert here, so I'm not going. But what you are supposed to be an expert in, Jen, is itong West Philippine Sea issue. Pag-usapan natin ito. So ano tong ano tong mga claim ng China, to be more technical about this, hanash ng China, na may gentleman's agreement, and then ngayon they're threatening to release audio. Ano to, compromat, KGB style? I mean, this is crazy. I mean, and then my new model ng deal. I mean, everyone is denying it. They're just burning bridges. First of all, what on earth is China talking about? Second, could there be any basis to it? And third, what is the implication? This is just making things worse.
Well, I think, when you think about it, China probably knows or realizes that its credibility is pretty low when it comes to compliance with international agreements. No, I mean, its actions in the West Philippine Sea and South China Sea are serious. Are serious, and they detract from its credibility overall. No? So tingin nila siguro ang ganti dyan is to also diminish the credibility of the other party, so the Philippines. No? So this seems to be the way that they've decided on to try to do that. No? Gantihan lang bale, no? In the hope that by showing the Philippines to be untrustworthy or unreliable or deceptive, etc., they're hoping that that will keep other nations from coming to the Philippines and offering support, no? Parang ang talaga, ang tawag yung tarring the opponent or something, di ba?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess that's the overall strategy, no? And so now they're using this and deploying this, particularly with respect to these two areas, no? Ayungin particularly, and then Scarborough lately, hoping that that will then stick. No? Kasi alam nilang yun din yung issue which the Philippines has been highlighting, no? And because of the way they've been bullying us essentially in these places, no? They know that it is the source, essentially it's a source of power on the part of the Philippines. It's a source, it is what generates support for the Philippines in the international community. So that's why they're releasing these so-called agreements, no, alleged agreements, to try to tell the international community or try to convince the international community that they should not be coming to the Philippines to give it support, because what is happening now is essentially the Philippines' fault. That it is reversing its positions, that it is deceiving the international community, no? And all along, China has been acting properly and fairly in accordance with these alleged agreements, no? So, yun ang lumalabas dyan, no?
Can we pause on that, Jake? This is a very important point. Thank you for pointing that out. Kasi, ang basa ko dyan is, obviously, if you talk about other democracies, flagship democracies, alam nila na Duterte was dodgy. And the idea was Duterte was an aberration. Where I can see this strategy of if you can beat them, badmouth them, could work is with ASEAN, right? Because if you look at the rest of the ASEAN, either they're quiet or nagpaparinig sila na, oy, huwag kayong magulo dyan. Or, just fix it. Or, the other version I hear is, presidente nyo nga, si Digong nga, ayaw i-assert ang West Philippine Sea, tapos umasa kayo sa amin, ang gulo nyong kausap, kayo nga magulo eh. So I hear that kayo ang magulo, a lot from our ASEAN counterparts, or yung mga nakipag-usap sa mga ASEAN countries, I'm not gonna say which countries. So sa kutob ko, this Chinese mudslinging, whatever, disinformation, is actually gonna be, it has an logic to it because yun ang pwede gamitin ng ibang ASEAN countries to say, ayun pala, may mga anggulo nyo palang kausap eh. Diba? I mean, yun ang nakikita
Yeah,
kong
pwede
value ng
yan.
strategy na yan eh. That's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, pwede yun. In a way, it also cultivates distrust of the Philippines and keeps ASEAN fragmented. No? Through these maneuvers, they're able to keep the Philippines from gaining more support within the region, which is exactly what they want. No? Unified ASEAN is something that China believes is a threat to it talaga. No? So that's why they do anything and everything to try to keep that from happening. Okay, so pwedeng yun, that makes sense then, that they could be doing this for that particular audience and for
Oh,
that
iba yung
purpose.
audience eh, hindi West eh. Iba yung hindi democracies eh. Oh.
Yeah.
Now, what about the sketchy dodginess part of it? Because it
Yeah.
actually makes also China look bad, di ba? Na ang ginagawa
Yes.
nila ay mga patago na medyo, di ba, parang
Mm.
malihim-lihim effect. So, that actually doesn't make China look like a credible actor also.
Yeah, that's why it's ano nga eh, parang they don't seem to realize that it actually backfires on them because ang lumalabas is assuming that these were true, no? Then their mode of diplomacy is one based on deception, subversion, and going around the leadership and authorities, no? Going directly to
Mafioso.
the ground, no?
Mafioso. I mean, gangster.
Oh,
Mafioso style.
oh, yeah. Going directly to the ground to secure these operational agreements or, these temporary agreements. Gentleman's agreement nga tama ang tawag nila, di ba? Which is inherently non-binding. And then later on, turning around and saying, no, you're bound by that. No? So, if other countries are looking at this and seeing this, biglang madududa na sila. Teka muna. Di ba? Baka mamaya they're gonna later allege that we're bound by the agreement made with some of our local officials or some functionary there, no? They will only become even more suspicious about China, about their officials, about anything that has to do with China, no? So it actually backfires and increases the costs for China in terms of any transactions that they would try to engage in with other countries. Magiging doubly cautious sila and probably in negotiations even more careful and hardline, no, in their positioning, no? So, yun nga, tama ka. I mean, it's
It's a very
I'm
dangerous,
sure.
problematic position. Yeah, kasi Jay, di ba, parang they're burning bridges. You have National Security Council coming out, lashing at them. You have DND Secretary Gibo saying na, wag niyo nakausapin yung ambassador in China yan. Parang ano yun, kiss of death na yun. Kung, like, they will divulge informations na dapat. Siyempre, di ba, in diplomacy, you need confidentiality. Otherwise, you cannot have a proper conversation. Kung ganyan yung kabila, uy, release namin yung ano, di ba? Wag, ayaw na kitang kausapin. Ano mangyari ngayon, di ba? I mean, this is a disaster. This is a diplomatic disaster.
Yeah, and it's only making it even more difficult for them to achieve their objectives within the region, which is to turn the Philippines, basically, no? They want the Philippines close. They want the Philippines to be stable, quiet, and malleable. And they definitely don't want the Philippines to, allow other countries, external powers to have any kind of role, no? But all of this is only resulting in the opposite effect. They're driving us towards the situation which they precisely is the opposite of what they want, no? So yun. I don't know if it's
Right.
because they're so isolated or everything is so filtered that they become their own, like
Silos. Oo, medyo out of touch.
Oh, yeah.
Jay, I want to ask, of course, the other implication is, hindi ba pinapahamak nila yung mga bata nila? I'm sorry, hindi nila pinapahamak yung mga friends nila sa Philippines. I mean, this is not gonna make Duterte's look good. I mean, this is something that, I mean, we saw Speaker of the House Romualdez openly using the word budul. Nagbubudulan itong mga to, di ba? Obviously, may axe to grind. Marami may axe to grind with Duterte. So we're already gonna face potentially an ICC warrant, I mean, even if the ICC doesn't happen, eto pwede sila mapin down. Now, we know that there are no laws for treason in times of peace. But from a political standpoint, I mean, this could lead to some hearings, very incriminating hearings. That could
Yeah.
really damage the Dutertes, right? Which is not
Yeah,
good for China. They
he's
have
even
been doing a
exposed to he's even exposed to a charge of no, Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, no?
which has what, 10 to 20 years potentially also, no? I mean, di
Yeah.
ba?
Yeah, and perpetual disqualification for public office.
Which is
So,
relevant in light of next year's elections, right?
yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, again, parang that's why I think no, these are parang acts of desperation in a way. The anything and everything they're throwing anything and everything they can in the hopes that that would be enough to turn
Something will
sympathy
stick.
to them.
But Jay, I want to ask you here, hindi ba medyo nakakabahala din ito? I mean, both you and I, we have been marooned in this fight. I mean, you way longer than me, of course, but at least for the past 10 years, we have been together since 2012, 13. I mean, together in terms of fighters for West Philippine Sea. Baka naman mamaritas tayo sa hearing. Um, Ako naman kasi ang worry ko naman is baka naman mag-ano tayo, mag-overshoot na naman tayo this time. If Digong was overshooting of, let's not be dependent on US, baka naman we go into the other side. Both of us are teaching in UP. I mean, we are
Yeah,
traditionally
yeah.
progressive, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
makabayan at the same time. Not makabayan block, but makabayan in terms of mahal natin ang bayan natin. Again, not to gaslight us. Obviously, kasalanan ng ambassador ng China yan. Palitan yun and put someone more effective like Zhao or something like that. But, Becho, this is also not good for us, right? Because it might whet the appetite of some more, let's be honest, pro-American amboys. I'm not going to name names. Some people who want us go all in and, burn bridges with China. Diba? What is your sense on that direction of the wind?
Well, tama ka, no? I mean, it could go a little bit too far on the other end, di ba? No? Because after all, regardless of what happens, we're still neighbors, essentially. And China is still a regional power. So yeah, the thing is, I know that on our part, especially in foreign affairs, there are people who are worried about that and they're trying their best, no, to try to keep channels open or keep some avenues still open. No, they're not like burn every bridge. No, they want to keep certain bridges open because of that. The reality is that after all is said and done, we still need to deal with them, and they're still neighbors, and there's still a lot that they can do. Not in a bad sense, but in a good sense. No, there's still that potential.
You mean for trade, investment, people-to-people
Yeah.
relations?
Yeah, yeah. Pero the thing is, I don't see that. I don't see that similar parang preservation or attempt to preserve certain things, at least, or to keep something sacred. I don't see that on the other side right now. From all the public statements of their MOFA, not just their mouthpieces like the Global Times, but MOFA itself and their official spokesperson, official statements, I don't see any kind of quarter being given talaga. No? It's
So what
either
you're
you
saying is
bow to us
ginusto
or
nila yan.
else.
So what you're saying, Jay, is ginusto nila to. I mean, kasalanan nila yan. Why should we, di ba,
Hmm.
carry the water for them? We already have our own problems to deal with, right? Parang yun ba
Yeah,
yung
yeah.
let them sort it out on their own and mature and grow up.
And the truth is, we have very little to lose. No? I mean, West Philippine Sea. I mean, they've achieved what dominance in terms of deployment of forces. They're so confident that they have everything that they need to do anything that they want, whether we like it or not. No, I mean, we have nowhere else to go. In a way, no, we're up against the wall. So our only choice is to push back.
And stand their ground.
Yeah,
Until
and stand ground. No?
they blink, yeah.
And they may think that they have the upper hand, but I remember I said it's a funny story. In one back when I was still doing track 2 with them, and I was confronted by one higher level senior official of the party. And we were discussing mga kumbaga contingencies. No? And he said, he was basically mouthing off about how superior their forces are, etc., etc. And I basically quoted a line from Daredevil. And I simply said, well, yeah, that may be true, but to paraphrase Daredevil, I said, a man without hope is a man without fear.
I mean, is it the Al Pacino one or something?
No, this is from the comic book.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you take away all these
A devil's
options.
advocate pa rin inisip ko. Sorry. You mean there? Yeah, but yeah, that's a very important quote. Yeah, man
Diba?
without yeah.
Yeah. So even they don't know what we might be willing to do if they take away all of these options and push us so hard.
No, but they know, right? I mean, Jay, we have options also, right?
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
give Americans 10 more bases close to Taiwan. We can give
Yeah.
Japanese more access. I mean, it's not like
Yeah,
wala rin tayong option, and we can make this, we can also tighten the
exactly.
screws on them. May options,
Yeah,
may
exactly.
tayo.
For them kasi maybe they think that that's not possible, no? Ganun sila eh. They have particular, parang biases and prejudices
Blind
kasi eh.
spots, yeah.
But yeah. I mean, that's entirely possible. They take away all of these islands, suddenly US bases start sprouting up all over the country, or suddenly we'll start buying missile batteries to cover the entire South China Sea. I mean, these are things they don't see, no, as possible reactions to what they're doing.
Yeah, yung typhoon, di ba? The Americans
Mm.
brought in the typhoon. That was a warning shot. Shot across the bow, yan eh. They can bring in 10 of those typhoons, 20
Yeah,
HIMARS, Patriot missile systems. I mean,
yeah,
they can make
exactly.
life very difficult and atat din ng mga Amerikano, di ba? They're also here to
Yeah,
that's their own
yeah.
grind. The Japanese hate them. The
Yeah.
Australians have their own. So my point is, I think ridiculous yung thinking ng China that this comes down to AFP versus PLA. No, this is
Mhm.
way more than that. They're a
Yeah.
constellation of alliances here. But Jay, I want to go
They're
back.
giving us every reason to
Exactly.
create strong alliances and giving other countries every reason as well to build them. I
Exactly.
don't say
So,
it's counterproductive talaga eh, for them, at least from their side.
Jay, I want to ask you a little bit also about the Sandy K issue. I don't. I'm conscious not to go too much into operational military issue because we have, of course, Admiral Ong among others to talk to about this. Siyang kausap ko when it comes to this HIMARS issue, technical issues on Taiwan, Mavuli. So, I don't want to pressure you too much on areas that are beyond your core expertise. Pero ano, understanding mo naman dito sa Sandy K, because our understanding here is that the Sandy K, the Chinese are doing something there. And of course, in international law, the low tide elevation can bump outward your territorial sea, right? If it falls within a 12 nautical. So, anong ginagawa ng China sa Sandy K? The first time we heard about Sandy K was 2018, di ba? When Justice Carpio made this public. Anong kalagayan dyan sa Sandy K? What's the scramble dyan malapit sa Pag-asa? Because this is right outside Pag-asa's waters, yeah.
Well, minimum is that they're basically trying to constrain our freedom around Pag-asa Island. Before, we had full access to everything, all the resources of the reefs around Pag-asa Island. Now they're pushing us backward or back and basically depriving Pag-asa Island of its sources of simple sustenance like fish. No, they're also limiting the area over which we could say we have absolute control basically. No, kasi you get maybe 500 meters away from Pag-asa Island, they're already there shadowing you and if necessary preventing you from doing anything that you need to do. No? So it's like their cabbage strategy says. Now you keep enveloping these areas, no, within layers and layers of activities, militia, Coast Guard, Navy, etc., until eventually it becomes too difficult to access that. No, either you're unable to sustain your presence because you cannot bring in supplies, no, or you voluntarily say, you just give up, no, because everything is just too hard anymore. So I think it is all part of that, no. Now, yung Sandy Cay and the possibility that they are artificially building up these islands, no? I mean, that just provides them with parang an excuse, no, to try to constrain us, no, from moving around closer to Subi, etc. So that's what I think is really right now is really happening. Island building, I don't see yet, no, how those little patches can give them any serious advantage. I mean, after all, Pag-asa Island
Operationally, you
is
mean
full-fledged natural
military-wise.
island. No? It's much bigger. No, I've seen Sandy Cay 2 and 3. We became pretty close to that. It's relatively small and it's barren and it doesn't have much use unless you actually convert it into an artificial island.
Jay, I don't want to press you again too much on the operational tactical issue, but I just want to ask, what is your general opinion, maybe not as a non-expert on military affairs, but as a West Philippine Sea guy, to what degree should America get involved here? Is the status quo okay? Kasi binobomba-bomba tayo ng tubig, na-injure yung mga naval officers natin, nagka-consolidate ng China militarization nila. Do you think America should be involved more or involved more in ways that doesn't necessarily undermine the Philippine strategic autonomy? I mean, what is the Goldilocks solution?
Yeah, no, I think number one, we have to keep in mind, no, it has to be the Philippines. It makes the decision, which takes the lead. No, the Americans cannot have any interest higher than ours, essentially. No, especially when it comes to issues of sovereignty. That's our burden to carry. No, and the U.S. can only provide assistance and support insofar as it remains consistent with their own position. And their own position when it comes to territorial claims is that as long as it's peacefully resolved. Okay. But yun nga, the fact that they want things to be peacefully resolved gives us a little bit of flexibility, no, in terms of the alliance to seek assistance to prevent non-peaceful, coercive, or forceful resolution of the disputes. No? So yung pwede natin gamitin. Pero again, we have to be the ones to set the terms. We have to be the ones to set the parameters, not them. No? Kasi hindi sila yung nandito. Whatever the result, whatever the outcome, it's the Philippines that has to live with the outcome. No? So that's why I'm not in favor of them taking on any greater role than what we decide to allow them to have. Yan.
Oh, kasi medyo nakakairita yung mga iba na parang
Yeah.
naman American knight in shining. No, I mean just let us do what our thing and then just be over the horizon, right? And give us
Yeah.
good weapon systems, hindi yung mga I mean, hanggang ngayon
Yeah.
wala pa tayong kahit isang F-16 or F-15 fighter from the US. Wala pa tayong corvettes na advance. I mean, they just gave how many? 17 billion to Israel, 60 billion to Ukraine. Baka na lang binigay sa Pilipinas, 500 million. I mean, 500 million it looks big, but it's actually nothing compared to China. Ilang araw lang na expenditure ng PLA yan, di ba?
Yeah. Pero unfortunately, the reason why they're that restrained in giving us aid and assistance, unfortunately, is that we also have a history kasi of
Absorption capacity to put nicely.
getting more than we can, than we can sustain. No? And you have all those F8 Crusaders, for example, and before that the F5s, and we used to get all that assistance for free, and we never even put in our budget enough to maintain
them.
Just allow them to deteriorate, no? And then we ask for more. So that experience,
Jay, I completely understand na we should be blamed. Pero kasi tayong problem child, sila yung may pera. So, para scouting yan, di ba, sa sports, you invest in the player who's a diamond. So, sa tingin ko naman, Philippines is a much more developed country than 1960s, 70s, 80s. We're upper middle income country almost. At ito na, China is staring into us. I mean, we cannot afford to be complacent like we
Pero I think that's also why now
but I do
we're
not agree it
getting
applies
more.
to Philippines in the 21st century. Yun lang point ko kasi, Jay. Kasi feeling ko, again, this is not you per se, pero feeling ko maraming self-blaming nang nangyayari dyan. And I'm not comfortable with us because by the same token, why is Ukraine getting 60 billion? Anong ulit ang history record ng Ukraine? I mean, yes, they did very strongly in 2022, but before that, Ukraine was 10 times more corrupt than the Philippines or something like that.
Yeah.
So for me, you have to invest in a rough diamond kasi ito na talaga.
Pero we also have to send the right signal.
Level up. I completely agree.
Under Duterte, it became clear the signaling was that we're not willing to defend. We were putting our money where our mouth was when it came to these disputes, no? And Duterte was saying, 7 minutes lang yung missile. So why should the US, spend billions of dollars on us when that's it? What we were telling them essentially was that we're not going to use them to defend ourselves anyway.
And baka
ngayon, it's only under this government, diba? Under this administration, medyo nagbago, naging mas robust. Ayan, then we're seeing all these more tangible offers na.
But Jay, I agree and disagree with you. I agree with you in the sense that kung ikaw America, bibigyan mo ba si Digong ng advanced weapons? Baka bibigay niya sa China the next day, di ba?
Yeah.
At the same time, my counter argument to that would be kasi, of course, alam niyo naman, parati yung kasama si Ronald Llamas at saka yung mga tao in Aquino administration. Si Pinoy daw mismo, may mga times na nainis na siya na bakit yung mga weapons na binibigay sa Pilipinas. Kasi we had Greg Pauling on my show who openly said Aquino was taken for granted. How many state visits did Aquino have again? Anong binigay? So, again, Jay, I buy the argument na Digong, kahit ako hindi bibigyan ng anything yan. Pero, andun naman si Pinoy 6 years. Bakit din tayo binigyan nung panahon ni Pinoy? Kaya bumili tayo ng FA-50 tuloy sa Korea. Sana F-16 fighter ka agad. Do you get where again, Jay, I do not disagree na may problema tayo. Kaya nga rough diamond, to put it nicely. But even when we had good presidents like Pinoy on the West Philippine Sea issue, nakapos tayo eh. Alam mo naman, Jay, you know that better.
Yeah.
You know?
But again, it all depends on context. I mean, at the time, the Americans did not really see the stakes in the West Philippine Sea insofar as they were concerned, no? As long, until the Chinese started to warn away their aerial patrols from the artificial islands, no? Diba? That was the only time that they realized that their freedom of navigation was really threatened. So again, you have to thank China for that, no? Another misstep on their part for bringing in the US. No? Pero yeah, ganun eh. I mean, it's not just the leadership, it's also the conditions eh. Also remember, during Pinoy's time, the concern of the Obama administration was trying to bring China on board on like what climate change and economic, di ba? Yun yung reality eh.
Again,
So,
okay, my other counter argument, gets ko Israel is a special ally of US. Gets ko Ukraine is in the middle of the war. So fine, they get, I don't know, 200 times more aid than us, fine. Pero Jordan, Pakistan, I mean, you want to talk about political instability, unreliability. I put Philippines above Pakistan and arguably above Jordan too. Those guys have F-16 fighters. So again, Jay, I know that you can criticize me and say, oh, Richard, ito ka na naman, mendicant. For me, you have to choose your alliance. Otherwise, what's the point? Kasi hindi tayo re-respetuhin. Kasi how can we be a useful ally kung wala tayong projection capabilities? Right? Ay, hindi naman pwede na rentier lang yung relationship natin. Sana may projection capabilities.
Totoo yan.
Diba?
And I think that's why
there
have been changes basically in the way that the Americans have been treating the alliance with the Philippines. No, so the latest development being the bilateral defense guidelines. No, they're adjusting. Pero yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard it's hard to ignore as well the history. And we also have a problem with what's the stability of our foreign policy in a way, no? I mean, we've seen
again, I would
those.
say Pakistan, Jordan. I mean, magulo. Well, Jordan, in fairness, medyo matino yung king niya. But Pakistan is a mess. I mean, can you even remember was the last prime minister there from Imran Khan, Nawaz Sharif? I mean, so again, Jay, I don't expect you to be an expert on all the regions, but that's something I do, right? I have books, I've written on Middle East. I'm familiar with those parts of the world. And nakikita ko sila, binibigyan sila ng mga armas, billion-billion na tayo hindi. Sino kalaban nila? Taliban? Kalaban nila ISIS? Ano bang ISIS kumpara sa hinaharap natin sa West Philippines? So then again, I know na maybe my views are a little bit outside the mainstream in the Philippines. But ironically, I had people like Elbridge Colby, mga Republicans, agreeing with where I come from na, o nga, nagkulang kami sa Pilipinas. Medyo hindi natin tinutulungan ng Pilipinas or prioritizing Philippines. So I hope we meet somewhere in the middle. We step it up.
No, I agree, man. Both sides, US and Philippines, have been taking the alliance for granted for so long, no? Part of it because we basically decided or agreed upon a division of labor that the Philippines will concentrate on internal security and Americans will take care of external defense. We simply do not have a long enough experience in alliance management, yung serious alliance management. And it's only now that we're basically learning, no, on the Philippine side. The US, they know that, they know alliance management because of their experience with many other nations, but they're not the Philippines.
Diba? I understand.
Iba yung Pilipinas eh, no? Kaya, yan. Sa ngayon, well, andyan na yan eh. So now both sides are trying, both sides are kumbaga still checking out where they could take things, diba? So hopefully we don't fall back into the postures and positions that we had back in the 50s and 60s, no?
Right. Kaya tayo nandyan, Jay. Kaya ginagawa natin, wala kasing podcast yung mga analyst nun. Tayo, lumalaban tayo eh. Magulo tayo. Last point, Jay, let's talk about the other flashpoint. We talked about Panatag Shoal, pinag-usapan natin ang Ayungin Shoal to a certain degree. Yung Reed Bank naman, anong mangyari dyan? Kasi mukhang mag-energy crisis na tayo eh. At tayo dyan. Oo.
Well, actually, I'm still waiting for what happens next when it comes to Reed Bank, because I had heard that the Philippines will be resuming its petroleum exploration. Which service contract, I wasn't sure, no? Parang hindi niya masabi. Pero yun nga, inaano pa natin. Let's see, I mean, they're supposed to do it within the summer of this year. in order to make
Jay,
progress.
sorry again. I know we're towards the end of our episode, but can you give a executive briefer? Ano itong reed bank issue na ito at anong difference ng service contract sa joint development or joint exploration? Just for people who are not familiar with the technicalities of that. Thank you.
Reed Bank is a large area west of Palawan. It is known to have 3 times the amount of natural gas as Malampaya. And we were supposed to have developed it already, no? Kasi it should have started way back in 2010, yung development ng reserve down. And it would have replaced Malampaya, the Camagong Malampaya Reserve, no? Which is now beginning to run out. There are several service contracts there. The one that is directly over Reed Bank is SC-72, which is subcontracted basically to Philex Mining, no? But there's also SC-75 and a couple of others in that area na which are due for exploration. Okay? Yung sa Reed Bank mismo,
So Jay, sino mga companies involved? Sorry,
dapat
sinong companies involved? The private companies, public companies?
Private, I remember, aside from Philex Mining, you have Nido Oil, which is an Australian company. PNOC has a stake as well. I forget the one in the south, but there's one CNOOC, the Chinese National Oil Company, is a part owner together with PNOC. No?
Interesting.
I think
Kailan
that's
pumasok yung CNOOC?
yata.
Kailan pa?
Ano
Digong
yan? No, even before.
so matagal pala yung
this
CNOOC doon. Okay.
Okay.
I didn't know
But they
that.
haven't been able to move forward on any of these
Oo.
contracts. No?
So in theory, service contract with participation of CNOOC, CNPC, one of those guys, and then China could have, I don't know, spun it as it's a joint exploration, pero sa totoo lang service contract. We could have done that, right? In theory.
The one with CNOOC is actually within archipelagic and territorial waters, northern Palawan.
So hindi Niners line.
Hindi nila kiniklaim yun. So walang problema yon from their perspective or from their side, no? Ang problema nga lang is that during Digong's time they tried to spin it as joint development, no? In the same way as what they wanted to do with Reed Bank, but these are completely different situations, no? So it's not a proper comparison, bale, no? It didn't correspond. So ngayon, we had all these contracts, service contracts dun sa West Philippine Sea around Reed Bank, etc. But they've been they were placed under moratorium for a very long time. They were not being implemented, no? And of course, if you're the oil company, this is supposed to be an investment. If you're the country like the Philippines, this is supposed to contribute to your energy security, so you need to develop it as soon as you can. No? Yun yung hinintay natin ngayon. This summer, supposedly, they were to resume on one or another contract, but yun nga, wala pang balita sa ngayon. We don't know if I don't know
intentionally, no? My understanding is baka better we don't talk about. I mean,
yes.
since the better don't talk about it,
Possible.
something good is probably happening.
Possible.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Professor J. Batongbacal. I want to do a little bit Ezra Klein style here. What are the let's say, top three readings, writings of yours or co-written you recommend for people to know more about the technicalities? Because I actually like the way you write, Jay, no? And a lot of your works, I drew on them for my own academic and non-academic writings, including recently I had a piece with the Diplomat magazine looking at the origins of Philippine claims, and I came upon your work together with the late Professor Eileen Baviera, the fantastic professor, a great inspiration for all of us. So I can vouch na pag binasa ka nila, hindi ito nosebleed na yung mga lawyerly na technical na mga ganun, na actually is very friendly. Can you give us three, maybe your own works or other works na pwede basahin yung mga kababayan natin para magkaroon sila, para mamulat sila dun sa technicalities? The reason I'm saying that, Jay, is maraming mga overnight expert na alam natin saan galing yung script nila, na kahapon singer, ngayon on-clause expert na, di ba? At alam natin, di ba, saan galing ang ano ito, yung mga... So, so that hindi tayo sa mga gulong mga propaganda na yan, what should they read?
Well, basics is yung primer nga namin ni Dr. Baviera. Although it's a little bit outdated because we wrote it 2013. Actually, I've been meaning to update it with the development since that time.
Yes.
And 10 years is probably enough time for that update, no? So that's primer on the West Philippine Sea from a Filipino perspective. It's available
It's
online.
free online. Free
Yeah,
online.
it's free. Second one, for books, well, I would recommend actually Greg Polling's Dangerous Grounds, because it covers both the Philippine side and the US side, essentially. When it comes to West Philippine Sea and South China Sea disputes, it provides a good historical background and context, no? So that's another one I recommend. The third one, let's see.
Your research dun sa East-West Center you did, I think, was also very useful because it looked at the history of America's strategic ambiguity, which I also
Yeah.
cited a lot. The Kissinger-Nixon doctrine of strategic ambiguity.
Yeah.
Do you have a more, kasi may Rappler piece ka on that, but do you have a longer piece that people can access for free?
Trying to remember. Kasi it was published twice, once in the Manila Studies Journal, but I'm not sure where that's available. Another one was in a Taiwanese publication. So that one I don't think is available online. I think it's on hard copy. So yun naman yung history ng Philippines vis-a-vis the US and how we were trying to get the US to help, no, as in protecting our claims to the Kalayaan Island Group, no? So
Right.
those I think I could recommend those.
And Jay, since I have Rizal behind me, and do you have an ilustrado, I don't know, Mabini or someone who has inspired you? Ako, Isabela de los Reyes, because as a senator, he was kind of involved in West Philippine Sea, right? Pushing for our claims there. Ikaw, is there an ilustrado or an writing from that era that also inspires the Makabayan part in you? Yeah.
Actually, I don't.
Sorry, I put you on the spot. Na fast talk the boy.
Actually, I don't, because
right? I mean, ako kasi I'm going back to the brains of the nation na Rizal Mares and to get inspiration for our time.
Actually, I go back to the old writings like Rizal, etc. More as a fallback. I mean, when I started on this advocacy for the West Philippine Sea and South China Sea, and I got interested in the law of the sea, it was basically because of learning new things that other people didn't know about. So that was what drove me to learn more about it, no? And then so at a certain point, then the trigger yung interest ko in history and these other things, no? So but I haven't really centered on any particular
essay. Is there a specific essay that you go back to? I mean, for me, I mean, one way also to appreciate more Rizal, yung Radical, bagong book ni John Eyre, I think is very, very easy and accessible to read and affordable always. Is there a particular essay of Rizal that you go back to once in a while to refresh yourself intellectually, spiritually?
The Philippines in 100 years.
Interesting. Thank you, Jay. I think we have to have a separate discussion. Sorry, I put you on the spot today. I know you were just here to discuss yung marites ng China. But naman, ka na abusuhin kasi ang dami mong ma-share at masabi. On that note, thank you very much, Professor Dr. Attorney Jay Batongbacal. Talagang inabuso kita lahat ng dimensions ng expertise and non-expertise mo. Maraming salamat, sir. Mabuhay ka and talk to you soon.
Welcome. Sige.
Salamat po. Mabuhay ka.